Joshua, Brian, welcome to the United States. How is it to be in the so-called land of the free?
Travel to United States is far more safer than just stay at Hong Kong, especially we don't need to be worried fired by tear gas or rubber bullets by riot police.
So for the past 3 months, I think the entire world has been watching Hong Kong. How have the past 3 months been for you? Can you give us an insight view into your lives?
3 months ago, when 2 million people took to the street, I was still detained inside prison. It really impressed me by how more than 1/4 of the population in Hong Kong with the calls on free election and stop police brutality, which just show that Hong Kong people are not only economic animal, we deserve democracy.
This protest started first as a protest against the extradition bill, which would extradite criminal suspects to mainland China. But since then, Carrie Lam has withdrawn the bill. Why are the protests still going on? What is this protest really about?
Free election and universal suffrage are the promise made by Beijing before the transfer of sovereignty.
Just to give a little bit background about you, Brian, we first saw images of you because you were one of the protesters who stormed into the Legislative Council. After that, you were the only protester who took off your mask and read out the demands of the movement. Why did you do that?
I think it's really an accumulation of the frustration and anger. So to us, the legislative chamber, which is originally supposed to belong to the people, right? And I think by retaking that and storming it, I think we symbolically make a very strong gesture that we are voicing our discontent against the system in itself.
Many people would call it a very brave move. Have you ever regretted doing that?
The moment when I asked myself, should I step up and make a speech? I was calm. I was at peace with myself. My heart didn't pump. Honestly, I just speak from my heart.
With that moment and that day, July 1st, some people call it a turning point when the protests really turned violent. Do you take any accountability for the damage, the vandalism?
In such leaderless movement, we're strongly aware even force has been used by protesters. It is easy to justify under the crackdown of human rights. During the 1st of July, none of the police or none of the security guard get hurt. If Hong Kong Legislative Council or the Chief Executive are both democratically elected, none of us need to gather or storm into the Legislative Council.
As I'm sure you know, on August 13th, a Chinese journalist was brutally attacked by protesters at the Hong Kong International Airport. Do you condemn these violent attacks?
We strongly aware on what's going on in Hong Kong International Airport during the past month protests. Of course, force has been used by protesters. React on how the...
So you recognize it, but do you condemn it?
I don't condemn on any kind of force used by protesters, and I just hope people could realize that even force have been used by protesters, they need to pay the price and face prosecution, maybe 5 or 10 years of jail terms. So what is the reason for them decided to use force? I think it's more important to understand instead of criticize on them. And it's significant and also important to stop all the violence by government respond to the political demand.
On the other hand, I also want to stress how much self-deliberation and correction that the protesters have demonstrated. After that incident, I think they've talked about and discussed in online platform about, have we gone too far? Should we apologize? Is it justifiable? What's the international reception about our action, right? So I think people have been extremely cautious and conscious about what they're doing.
How do you view the current situation? It started off as 5 demands, now it's down to 4. Inquiry in police brutality, releasing of imprisoned protesters, free democratic elections,
right,
and Carrie Lam to step down.
Yep.
Will you keep protesting until Beijing fulfill those 4 remaining demands, or is there a middle ground?
Perhaps people might ask or doubt it is really pragmatic or realistic to continue the fight. But just like 3 decades ago, no one would expect it, Soviet Union or the Berlin Wall will fall. So I think with our courage and passion, we really hope to continue our battle, especially we are aware that how more than 1/4 of Hong Kong's population took to the street, it already impress the world.
Would you meet with Carrie Lam if she invited you to the table?
5 years ago, during the umbrella movement, 5 student leaders joined the public meeting with Carrie Lam, the leaders of Hong Kong, which resulted in 4 of them being prosecuted and 2 of them went to jail. 3 decades ago, during the Tiananmen Square student movement, also student leader or student activists has kind of open dialogue with Beijing government officials, but it also still results in Tiananmen Square massacre. If the kind of dialogue is just the PR show or the strategy or tactics for Beijing to get support instead of conduct concrete political system reform, which will just cause our movement continue.
One cannot help but make the parallels between the current protests with what happened in Tiananmen in 1989. Are you worried?
As we are aware how the troops were already moved to the border, we can't be totally optimistic that President Xi will act rationally. I think now is the time for world leaders and also people around the world should send a clear message to President Xi. No matter sending troops to Hong Kong or implementing martial law or emergency ordinance, those 2 nuclear options are not the way out. And we encourage and also urge the US Congress to pass the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act to show their support on Hong Kong's democratization. At the same time, US government should stop exporting riot weapons to Hong Kong police. I hope US government will not be the partner of police brutality in Hong Kong.
The Chinese Foreign Ministry has accused the United States of encouraging the protests. What connection do you have with the Western countries, and have you ever been in contact with their intelligence officers?
I have never contacted with their intelligence officers and never received any donation or funding from any government all around the world.
I think it's simply a denigration to say that, you know, they do this because it was some sort of like foreign donation, right? If you want to really take a look at what's the motivation of the protester, you just have to go to Hong Kong, go into the street, talk to the protester. So I think it's a huge insult to the protester. They are so brilliant, so smart, and so committed.
There are more radical protesters who have come out to criticize you for not doing enough in this movement. Is this criticism fair?
It's good to listen to different criticism instead of only listen to anyone showing the positive or strong support on you. I would say that as the one engaged in street activism a few years ago, I'm not the leader of this movement. When 2 million people took to the street, I was still in jail, and I'm not the one really get the possibility or any chance to mobilize people to the street. But I just hope to let the voice of Hong Kong people being heard in the international community put the global spotlight not on my personal journey, but on the strike of Hong Kong people.
How many times have you been arrested already in your life?
I've been arrested for 8 times, including spending 120 days in prison.
What does that do to a young person?
No one would enjoy spending life or spending time in prison. But I think that's the price that we might need to pay when we need to fight for democracy and freedom.
Joshua, after this trip, you're going to go back to Hong Kong. Do you think there might be any difficulties for you to get back into the country?
With the risk that paid by different activists, I also need to face the pre-trial of my court case on early November. Will government or police arrest or prosecute me again with different other charges? It's not surprise at all under such crackdown of human rights.
A lot of people look up to you for inspiration, for encouragement. Where do you look for inspiration?
Social movement is the process of self-actualization. In the past 6 or 7 years journey, especially after the end of umbrella movement, we, including myself, might be downhearted or depressed, especially this really a hard time for us to be prosecuted, to be jailed, and etc. But even we still have no hope towards the regime, but we still have hope towards people.
To me, I'm a Christian, and I think in this movement, a lot of Christians have stood up and take a very active role in the movement. And to me, it's always believing that there will be justice, there will be a kingdom where justice will prevail.
Do you want Hong Kong to be an independent country?
I hope Hong Kong can be the place with genuine autonomy and freedom. And of course, now the 5 major demands proposed by Hong Kong protesters is under the current existing constitutional framework and the ultimate goal is just free election to elect our own government.